Hello again, this is Dan Clouser, and welcome back to the Journey My Mother's Son podcast. Now I'm joined with Jeff Patterson, who's an author. He's also a practicing and teaching in the meditation and martial arts fields. Jeff, thanks for joining me today.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Looking forward to the conversation. Before we get started, just introduce yourself in your own words. Who is Jeff today?
Yeah, I've been running a meditation center and martial arts academy here in Portland, Oregon now for about 30 years. I was kind of brought to the meditative arts in a bit of a roundabout way. It wasn't my first choice. I was a young guy, very much into Western boxing, and I met a boxing coach who was very influential in my career. And after working with him for a few weeks, he said something to me that changed my life forever. In that he said, if you really want to be a good boxer, you should start doing meditation and Tai Chi. And at the time, I was this young kid, 19 years old, thinking, isn't that for like old people in the park? How's that going to help me be a
Right.
better fighter? And I, s- I started doing the practice, and it's changed my life in many ways through the years here at the academy. I've had over 26,000 students come through the academy, and I've seen the meditative arts positively influence people's lives hundreds of times over. And it's really made me passionate about trying to get the word out there and help as many people as I can.
Yeah, I love it. So, you know, I think a lot of times when people are people aren't educated, think about martial arts. Um, it's they focus more on the violence of it, so to speak, as opposed to the meditative and peaceful part of it. Can you kind of, clear that up as to how they tie together, and how they feed off of one another?
Yeah, I think the meditative arts is a lot of people get this idea that meditation is one way. It's all about like the spiritual side of the practice. In reality, I break down meditation into five different kind of paths that you can follow. There is the athletic side that teaches you how to be more in tune with the mind body connection and improve your performance and your awareness. And many professional athletes across the board from any sport you can think of these days are practicing the meditative arts to help improve their performance. Then you have the therapeutic side of the practice that's good for your health and longevity. There's the medical side of the practice, and all of Chinese medicine is based off of Qigong theory, which is a very influential meditation path to follow. And then there's the philosophical side of the practice, which is great for strategy and opening up your peripheral vision to see things from many different angles. And it's always been kind of something I've been very passionate about. And then there is the spiritual side as well. And not every practitioner that comes to the meditative arts is going to follow all five of those paths, but you can see just by breaking it down that way that there's a lot of different practices that you can draw in from and pull out some different benefits that can affect many different areas of your life.
I love that. And, you talked about professional athletes doing a lot of the meditative arts nowadays, and a lot of that, um, from what I understand, revolves around vision work. Envisioning yourself in a situation and how you're going to perform in that situation. Like a lot of times after a big win, you'll hear an athlete, somebody say, hey, were you surprised that, this was it? And they're like, no, that's literally how I've played this scenario over in my head a million times before it actually took place. So talk a little bit about that, that part of the practice.
Yeah, so visualization definitely is something that is used all the time in athletics and very important. But also for an athletic person who's incorporating meditation into their practice, it's a whole mindset around the meditation lifestyle, and I always teach people to learn how to build an evolving life practice with the meditative arts. Visualization is one of those small tools within the spectrum of different options that we have, from breath work, and understanding how to use the breath strategically to get different outcomes and change your physiology, your mental state, and your emotions. There is the improvement of your overall awareness and your mind body connection, teaching you how to be more in time and more present in what's going on. And then there's just the ability to control the mind and not let distractions get in the way. And so there's many different ways for an athlete to pull from these practices. And as they start to make them part of their daily habits through ritual practices, active practices, and philosophical practices, then they can really start reaping the benefits from having meditation in their life.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, visualization is definitely something, I come from a coaching background before my wife and I started traveling, and that was something that we, not necessarily in a meditative sense, but just the visualization in general of putting yourself in that situation. But it also, I mean, that's not just athletics. I mean, talk about how that can just translate into real life.
Yeah, so, you know, using the meditative practices, we break it down into ritual practices, active practices, and philosophical practices. And ritual practice is like the core of your training, and it's where you set time aside every day and you do some breath work or maybe a sitting meditation or some movement practices like Tai Chi or Qigong. And once you have that kind of time that's set aside and that starts to become just part of the way you live your day, then you start to see benefits from that. But it's where I think there's a disconnect for a lot of people is that they'll start doing a meditation practice and they'll feel good when they're doing their practice. And then the whole rest of the day, they're stressed out and they're distracted and they've got all these things coming around. And so by integrating active practices, which can be done in 60 seconds or 2 minutes, and you put them in every 60 or 90 minutes throughout the day, it starts helping you bring your awareness into all of your day-to-day activities. You can do these things when you're walking down the street or standing in line at the grocery store, and having that ability to now start living the lifestyle of a meditation practitioner rather than doing it as a hobby. This is where we really start to reap all the benefits of it. And then you have the philosophical side of the practice where these things can be used in active and ritual based practices. And they're great because they help you kind of see things from a multitude of different angles rather than being so stuck on just one path to get from A to B. And so when you can do that, it really starts opening up possibilities in how you can use the practice in pretty much everything you do.
Yeah. Yeah, because again, I think a lot of times, when you talk about breaking it into these smaller segments, a lot of times people are thinking, if you're meditating, you're taking, 30 minutes out of your day, sitting on your floor, doing nothing but that. But, from what you're saying, that's somewhat of a misconception, correct?
Well, there is those ritual times. And for the people out there that think, I don't have enough time to do that, because that's one of the most common things that I'll hear from people, it really gives you more time. Because what I've found through teaching thousands of students for over 30 years is that the people who are very busy are often the most distracted. And when you're distracted, you're not as productive. And so when you can integrate something like this into your life and you find how to be more centered and more focused in everything you do, oftentimes, even though you're setting time aside every day to, as you say, sit and do nothing, it's helping you be a little bit more in tune in everything you do, and it actually makes you more productive. And that's why so many professionals, business professionals across the board, entrepreneurs, you'll see these days talking about meditation and how it's really helped them because they understand this and see the benefits of it.
Yeah, so creating that clarity will literally, if you're taking that 30 minutes or whatever to create that clarity, it's actually going to end up saving you time throughout the rest of your day because you're eliminating a lot of those distractions, is what you're saying, right?
Yes.
Excellent. So tell me a little bit, you've got a method that's called the yielding warrior method. Tell me a little bit more about that.
So with our practice here, we teach people how to build an evolving life practice with understanding the core fundamentals and the science behind meditation, because Meditation is an extremely deep practice. I've been studying for 36 years and I'm still just a student learning all the time. And one of the things I think that helps people understand is in any meditation practice, we have what we call the five regulations, and they are regulating the body, regulating the breath, regulating the mind, regulating the energy, and regulating the spirit. And briefly, I'll kind of talk about what those are, and you can see how by focusing on these five pillars, you can use them in so many different ways. And the first one is regulating the body. And this is where we always start because it's the easiest one to see some of the biggest change from. So, an example would be, think about a time maybe when you're sitting in front of your computer for 3 or 4 hours, your posture's getting weak, you're feeling depleted and just kind of run down. Maybe your neck's getting a little sore. And then think about another time when the most important person in your world walks in the room and your body perks up and you feel like you're on top of the world. Well, we're in 100% control of these two different energetic states all day, every day. And so, learning how to regulate the posture and the muscular tension in the body in everything we do is very helpful to control our overall energetic states. On a little deeper level of regulating the body, it involves maintaining some kind of muscular development, some flexibility, eating a healthy diet, making sure you're getting an appropriate amount of sleep. All of these things kind of affect our physical state. And then we have regulating the breath. And regulating the breath is an extremely deep topic and something that we could, spend this whole session talking about. But basic idea is, in Qigong, they often refer to it as the science of the breath because there's hundreds of different breathing strategies. And once we can learn how to use the breath strategically, we can use it to control our physical, mental, and emotional states. So because there's so many different breathing strategies, we break it down into yin methods and yang methods. Yin methods are often deeper, more holistic style of breathing meditations. And an example of a yin breath would be if you ever listen to somebody sleep, their natural breathing pattern is a longer inhale and a shorter exhale. And this is the body's natural way of bringing our conscious mind into our subconscious mind, which is where we are when we're sleeping and dreaming. And so, if we want to emulate that style of energetic expression in our practice, we can do those longer inhales and soft retentions at the end of the inhale and shorter exhales to help bring that energy inward, which is great for stress reduction, dealing with anxiety, with panic attacks, for boosting our creativity. There's lots of reasons why we would follow this path or this side of the practice. Then we have the yang side of the practice, which is more aggressive. And an example of that would be if you've ever had to push your car, you pick up something heavy, your natural instinct is to exhale, put tension in the breath, make it audible. And this helps expand the energy and make your bring it out and make you stronger. You'll see a lot of athletes do this before an event. They'll chant or they'll use their voice to kind of help pump them up and bring that energy outward. Then the third pillar is regulating the mind. And this is an extremely deep practice or topic and something that you'll study for the rest of your life if you dive into the meditative arts. And the basic idea is one of the second biggest questions that I'll hear people say is that I tried meditation, but it just didn't work for me. How can I make it work? And it's not about quieting your mind and reaching this state of nirvana. Everybody I've ever met in my entire career, and I've been fortunate enough to train with some amazing meditation practitioners from all over the world, gets distracted. We all do. You can't just meditate and feel like you're going to be off in this blissful place. And once you understand this, now say you're sitting and doing a meditation for 20 minutes and you get distracted 50 times during that session. But every time, because of our heightened awareness, we notice these distractions at the first sign of imbalance. We use our posture or our breath or our alignment to help bring us back to center. You just got 50 repetitions of being off center and finding that balance. And if you do that every day, every month, every year, you start to develop this power and this ability to stay focused in almost any distraction. And when we do this is extremely valuable because, there's one distraction after the next in everything we do.
Yeah.
There's the story that I really like about these two old monks, and they're walking down this dirt road after a huge rainstorm. There's puddles everywhere. They come up to this part of the road where, in order to get to the other side, there's a building on one side, there's trees on the other. You have to walk on the path to get through it. And there's a huge puddle there. And on the other side of the puddle is this beautiful little girl, and she's standing there in a white dress and she's crying. And the older monk, he yells across the puddle and says, "Is everything okay? Can we help you?" And she says, "I need to be somewhere, but if I walk across this puddle, I'm going to get my dress all dirty." And so he walks across the puddle, rolls up his pant legs, picks her up, puts her on his back, takes her to the other side, and she's off on her way. Well, him and the younger monk are walking a couple miles down the road, and finally, the younger monk is just furious and he says, "You know we're not supposed to touch girls, but you did back there at the puddle." And the older monk looks down and says, "You're still thinking about that girl? I left her back there at the puddle." And how many times in life do we have to get 2 miles down the muddy road before we realize we got to let this thing go? And so, understanding how to control and regulate the mind and notice these imbalances is a very important part of the training. The fourth pillar is regulating the energy. And regulating the energy is, again, a very deep topic and something that we talk for hours about. But the basic idea is once you've reached a competent level in regulating the body, the breath, and the mind, you now have the tools to guide the energy circulated in the body, to extend it outward, to lead it inward, to get different physical, mental, and emotional outcomes. And then the last pillar is regulating the spirit, which is very profound as well. And it's the idea that you're working towards that ultimate stage of enlightenment, and many monks and meditation practitioners will spend their entire life's journey on this path. But once you understand these five underlying principles of a meditation practice, you can see how it'll affect anything basically you do in life. And so as we build on these and get to a deeper level of understanding, it really starts to become influential in everything.
Yeah. I love that. So you've published a couple books. Tell me a little bit about the books and what somebody could get out of those.
Yeah, so my most recent book is called The Yielding Warrior. It's something I've been very passionate about for many years, and yielding is a concept that's used in the meditative and martial arts. And I've broken down yielding into three kind of pillars. There's physical yielding, mental yielding, and emotional yielding. Physical yielding is the idea that I push you, you push me, whoever's the bigger, stronger person with the most leverage eventually is going to push the other person over. But with yielding, instead of us trying to see who the bigger meathead is, when you push me, I get out of the way of that force. And now I can respond with less effort. So I'm not trying to butt heads with you and see if I'm bigger and stronger than you. Now it's obvious how this skill is beneficial in athletics because you're never in control of how strong the other opponent's going to be, and there's going to be
Right.
people that are always bigger and stronger than you. So in order to be good at physical yielding, a lot of things have to come into play. You need to be well rooted. The lower part of your body needs to be strong and flexible so you can change your central equilibrium without getting tight. The body has to be relaxed, the breath has to be calm, and the mind has to be present. Now, while it may be a lifetime journey to really master these skills, from day one, by adapting a meditation practice into your life, you start to become more aware of these things. And this is where it becomes very interesting because now, not only are you becoming more aware of them in yourself, but you also start to become more aware of these things in other people. And this is where we start moving into what I call mental yielding. So, say, for example, I say something that unsettles you and pick up on it right from that first sign of imbalance. It's a lot easier at this point to adjust the conversation and keep us in a happy place. And maybe if I'm not paying attention to that, I get so far off track, you want to knock me upside the head. And so learning how to use this in all of our interactions is extremely powerful. One, we're being more considerate, which is something we could all do more of. And two, it allows us to be strategic in our interactions and guide conversations to a positive outcome with the least amount of resistance. And this is great for relationships, for business, for sales, for negotiations. I mean, there's so many different ways we can apply this idea. Then we have what I call emotional yielding, and this is very similar to mental yielding. However, it's with our own interpersonal conflicts. So you think about many times something will happen to us and we'll respond and we'll go down this path and we might get an hour, a day, week down that road and realize maybe that wasn't the best choice. But by having a meditation practice into our lives and being more in tune with what's going on, oftentimes we can step back and not get emotional and evaluate the scenario and make a more level headed choice that will save us a lot of heartache on the other side. And so, and I've been explaining this idea of yielding now for many years, running the academy for over 30 years. And one of the most common things I'll hear people say is, yielding makes a lot of sense. In fact, I use yielding all the time. Well, I would agree in that I think everybody does some degree of yielding all the time, but it's kind of like if you or I were to walk into a crime scene with a detective who's been on the job for 30 years, I guarantee you that person would see things about the series of events and the timeline that I know at least I would have no clue of. And the meditative arts helps us see things inside of ourselves and inside of other people that I truly believe most people will go through life and never have any clue of unless they have a practice like this in their life.
Yeah. Yeah. Very interesting. So, Jeff, like you said, I mean, all these topics we could dig in for, for hours at a time, to try to unwrap it. But unfortunately, we can't do that. So, as we start to wrap things up here, I mean, is there anything that we missed that you feel would be important for the listeners to know?
I do. There's something that I always like people to consider when they're thinking about taking on a meditation practice. And for myself, after teaching for 30 years, one of the biggest challenges I have is getting people to realize the benefits of this practice and make it a consistent life habit. And so I've come up with three things that I always have people consider when thinking about taking on the practice. And I've found that it's very helpful in getting them to be more successful. And the first one is to think about why you're being drawn to the practice. What is it you're trying to change? What kind of benefits do you want to get from doing this practice? And once you have that, take it a step deeper and think, if I accomplish this and this works and I get those benefits, how is that going to change my life in 10 or 20 different ways? And then flip the coin. And if I don't do this, how is that going to negatively affect my life? Because we all need this fuel, and there's going to be days when the alarm's going to go off. It's time to get up and do our meditation, and I'll hit the snooze button. I'll do it tomorrow, and having a good, strong why and some depth to it will give us the motivation to start looking at it as something we get to do rather than some chore that we have to do. Then the second part is understanding consistency. And this is so important. There's this old Chinese story of this stone cutter who was very well known, and he would often have people traveling from all around to come stay with him for a few years and study his work. He'd make these beautiful sculptures of animals and landscapes. And because of this, he was very sought out. Well, every morning, the stonecutter would start his day off down at the river doing a meditation session. And one day, after he was done meditating, he was walking along the river and he had this vision of this big, beautiful Chinese mystical dragon that was about 6 feet tall and made of jade. And it was so taken by this vision that he decided that this was going to be his next project. And as you can imagine, finding a piece of jade that would support a sculpture like this is no easy task. So he spent the next few months traveling around looking for this perfect rock to create his sculpture. Once he found the rock, he brought it back to his shop and he spent the first few days just studying the rock and looking to see how this dragon would come out of the rock. And finally, when he just was ready to start work on the rock, he found one spot on the rock. He placed his chisel and he started tapping on this spot. Never moved his chisel once, and he was tapping hundreds, if not thousands, of times a day. A few days went by and nothing seemed to change. A few more days went by, nothing was changing. His apprentices were kind of starting to second guess his strategy and wondering if he needed to adjust what he was doing. A few more days went by, and finally he tapped it, and this big section of the rock broke off and made this beautiful, smooth, curved line that was soon to be part of the dragon's back. And one of his apprentices said, "How did you know that strike was going to break the rock?" And the stonecutter said, "It wasn't that strike that broke the rock. It was the thousands of strikes before it that broke the rock." And the apprentice got a little bit discouraged and said, "But I've been watching you and nothing was changing. Why didn't you adjust and try something different?" And the stonecutter got down on one knee and he felt the smooth line that he just created. And he said, "Oftentimes the work that we're doing is happening beneath the surface, and we don't see it, even if it's not visible to the naked eye. And not only is it changing the rock beneath the surface, but oftentimes the one who wields the hammer is benefiting from it as well." And I love this story because it talks about consistency and the transformation that's so closely related to the meditative arts, in that, we're doing this breath work and these movement practices and studying these philosophical concepts that we don't always see the change from day to day, but they're laying the foundation for us to benefit from these practices further down the road. And so consistency is so important with a meditation practice. It builds this discipline, this integrity, this perseverance that not only affects us during our practice, but in everything we do in life. And then the third thing that you want to consider is you need to find a guide, somebody that can help you build an evolving life practice, because, there's a million videos out there on YouTube and there's this app and that app. And I've actually seen students who have been self-taught and come into the academy and they've been practicing 10, sometimes 15 years. And they'll see somebody who's had a guide for 6 or 12 months that's a lot further along in their practice and get very discouraged, and life is short, your time is valuable, and having somebody to help point you in the right direction can save you a lot of time. And so if you think about what your why is, you understand the importance of consistency, and you find a guide, you can accomplish anything you want with your meditation practice.
Yeah, I love that. Love that. Jeff, if anybody's out there that wants to get in contact with you, find out more about your book, more about the practice, how can they find you on the internet?
Uh, theyieldingwarrior.com is my website. And if you'd like to get a free copy of the book, you can go to theyieldingwarrior.com/book and see that. Also on the website, we have an online program that teaches you how to build an evolving life practice with the meditative arts. And for those of you out there that maybe have a yoga studio or martial arts studio or a life coach and you want to learn how to teach these arts, we also have a teacher training program up there as well.
Excellent. Excellent. So, Jeff, that brings us to our final question. As you know, the subtitle of the podcast is Many Little People in Many Little Places, which comes from the opening lyrics of a Michael Franti song, Gloria, which go, "When many little people in many little places do many little things, and the whole world changes." So, it's one of the little things that Jeff does on a daily basis to make the world a little bit better place.
This is something that I learned from one of my mentors that I really enjoy doing and get a lot of value in is I I look at what my values are that I want to move towards, and also what my values are that I want to stay away from. And I make the values that I want to move towards easy to achieve. So they're not goals that I will achieve only if I do XYZ, They're little things that I do every day that make me feel that value and resonate with it. And then the values that I want to move away from, I make it very difficult to reach. So I go through every day and I pick one of my towards values and one of my away from values. And as I'm doing my morning ritual, I think about those and I think about the ways that I can achieve the towards and stay away from the away from values. And it helps put me in a positive mindset and really feel and connect with that. So when I'm interacting with other people, I'm out there putting positive energy out to people.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So it's all about the little things. I mean, we get so caught up in, the big goals that we forget that all those big things are, literally made up of millions of little things. So, yeah, I think that's something we need to focus on more. So, for everybody out there listening, be sure to check out my other podcasts and blogs at journeymymotherson.com. While you're there, check out our Pay It Forward program where you can pick up a copy of one of my books, and Sandy and I will donate it to somebody along the way. Jeff, again, thank you so much for your time. This is a great conversation. I really appreciate you jumping on the show with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. You take care.
You bet.